So I just finished Orb, Sceptre, Throne by Ian C. Esslemont. Again, so this is a second read-through. So I had the Malazan itch. That sounds like something else. That sounds like something you would pick up in like a port in Quan or something, like Quan Tally. Like, oh yeah, he's got a bad case of the Malazan itch. Anyways, that's not what I meant. Anyways, I felt like reading some Malazan. And I've been working my way through rereading Ian C. Esslemont's novels of the Malazan Empire. I got to number 4, Orb, Sceptre, Throne, and it's just fantastic. I think if you have read the 10 very big books, the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and you're thinking about getting into Ian C. Esslemont, honestly, I think this is a great one to jump into. Like you could just finish The Crippled God, and if you're craving more, even though this is the 4th book, again, Ian C. Esslemont's books are not necessarily a series, this would be a great one to jump into. There's only one storyline that you would need prior knowledge of, and that's the storyline of Taishran and Kiska, which starts in Knight of Knives. We're introduced to Taishran and Kiska. Return of the Crimson Guard, something happens. Stone Wielder, again, there's another weird storyline that's unconnected to the rest of the story with Kiska, which culminates in this book. If you haven't read those other books, you will be missing out on what exactly that means, but it's not important. You can sort of pick it up as you go along. So if you do want to just start this one straight from The Crippled God, like it's set in Darujhistan, first of all. So it's almost a direct sequel to Toll the Hounds. In fact, I would just say it is straight up a direct sequel to Toll the Hounds. It's got everything. It's got Bridgeburners. It's got Moran. It's got Seguleh. It's got Kruppe, Kaladin Brood, Decimultor, Topper, Claws Assassins, Munitions Sappers, Fisher, Envy, Imas, Jagbet. Like, it's the most Malazan you can get. The only thing it doesn't have is Kachain Shamal and For Cruel Assail. It's got it all. Andy, yeah, it's just like I said, that Malazan itch. If you've got the Malazan itch and you need a scratch, I think Orb, Sceptre, Throne is the book for you. It's a big book, 850 words, and it's kind of a slow burn, I guess. It takes a while to get there. My one complaint is that the ending is very cryptic, doesn't really explicitly state what happened. I had already read this book before, and even this time rereading it, by the end of it I was like, wait, what actually happened? Like, why did this? So I had to look up some stuff online. I was like, oh right, of course that happened. But it's not really clear in the book. Also, I thought the ending was very, not convoluted, but there were so many different threads and so many different things, and a lot of them didn't really matter or weren't explained enough that they shouldn't even have been mentioned. But I'll get to that in the spoiler section. Speaking of which, spoilers ahead, I'm going to go through the whole plot of the book now, as much as I understand it. So we have what do we have, like 3 main storylines? But their background to it is Darujhistan, right? Darujhistan, thousands of years ago, during the time of the tyrants, had its imperial age. It was a much larger city. Even though it's huge now, it was a much larger city. It had better irrigation. It was the sort of center of a Genebakian empire, continent-spanning empire. We have Raced from Gardens of the Moon. Raced, he was a tyrant, but after he was dealt with and imprisoned or whatever, we had a succession of other tyrants rise up. And turns out they were all the same tyrant, whose sort of soul or consciousness was transferred via this sort of cursed mask. And whoever's wearing the mask, they are in control of the tyrant. So it seems like there's been multiple tyrants through history, but it's been the same person. And this tyrant has these 12 demon servants that are sworn to serve him, known as the Torud Cabal, which might not sound familiar. Torud is like the first empire word for shield. So it's kind of like the shield of the tyrant. They are supposed to protect the tyrant from magical assault or whatever. And they're all demons, right? And but eventually these demon servants, the Torud Cabal, either rebel against him or whatever. But they manage to break the circle, which is the circle of alabaster stones that creates this big magical dome or orb, hence the orb in the book. They break the circle, become known as the Circle Breakers, and form sort of a shadowy cabal that kind of rules Darujhistan, while they seal away the tyrant. And of course, we know some of these people: Vorkan, the Mistress of Assassins, Baruch, the High Alchemist. There's Derudan. There's a number of other ones. A lot of them are killed off in the span of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. But the three main ones remain, or three of them remain. But throughout the course of this book, this scholar Eben, he is being patronized by this humble measure, this blacksmith miner guy who's from outside of town, but is like super rich with all his smithies, in conjunction with this Lim guy. I can't remember his name, or was it anyways, this councilman guy. They're plotting to take over Darujhistan, and they're trying to dig up, I think, like treasure or artifacts. They end up digging up the tyrant, and so the tyrant comes back. Some politicking occurs, and a dictator or legate is named. So the legate is now in charge of Darujhistan, and then the legate puts the mask on, and it becomes the tyrant, becomes possessed by the tyrant. And Darujhistan is now ruled by the tyrant once again, wearing a gold mask, which is important. So the remaining Torud Cabal, they are sensing the tyrant's return, and so they try to do all these things to not prevent it, but they know that once the tyrant comes back, their minds are going to be, their will is going to be stolen from them, and they're going to have to serve the tyrant once more. So Vorkan chains herself with Otadderel in her basement. That's successful. Derudan gets like super high off this supply that Kruppe is giving her, so that keeps her mind so messed up that she can't obey the call. Baruch's trying this like alchemical magical barrier thing, but he fails. He doesn't get it finished in time, so he gets sucked out and against his will has to serve the tyrant. Although he does his best to sort of go against the tyrant's will and manages to do some things to help the conclusion of the book. So the legate then recalls the Seguleh, or Seguleh, I guess. I want to say Seguleh. Seguleh. Recalls the Seguleh, the sort of masked awesome fighters who I always picture as Japanese and wielding katanas. Recalls them back to the city. And so we follow the POV of the second Jan. There is no first currently, the second, and we get some really cool Seguleh lore and POV and fights and just great stuff if you love that sort of swordplay and whatnot. But they go back to Darujhistan and are basically slaves to the tyrant. They're his bodyguard / police force. And they're all following Jan, and Jan's like, I'm the second is meant to serve, so I'm going to serve. And it turns out that in ancient times, the Seguleh had been the tyrant's bodyguards, and that when the tyrant was overthrown by the Moranth, or with the help of the Moranth, because there's the Moranth and the Seguleh have like ancient rivalries, that the Seguleh fled to their island down in the south in exile, and so they're only returning now. They reconstruct the orb. And I like a lot of the sort of world building hints that, like, if we think back to Gederun's fete in Gardens of the Moon, when all the sort of party goers wear masks, that's sort of harkening back to the masks of the Seguleh in Darujhistan's history, and also how Darujhistan doesn't have a standing army. Its sort of fighting force, or its only martial prowess is in dueling. There's lots of dueling schools in Darujhistan, which again is because of their history with the Seguleh. So I love that sort of stuff, that we see that sort of tradition still in Darujhistan, but also in the Seguleh themselves. Very cool stuff. So they reconstruct the circle of this alabaster with these magical silver rods to hold it in place that Berthol Mekar gets to forge. And that creates this big translucent magical dome or orb around Majesty Hill, the sort of, or Majesty Hall, Majesty Hill, the place where the Legate Tyrant has his big castle and home. So we have Malazans. So there's Ambassador Aragan, which, if we remember Aragan, he's in a lot of books. I think he was the guy who signed up Sori at Gardens of the Moon, and like we seen him as sergeant, as fist, as all these different ranks, captain, and now he's ambassador, so sort of one up from fist. I imagine the position of High Fist would be his if they had conquered all of Genebacus, but because they have not actually conquered Darujhistan, he is ambassador in Darujhistan. So he's there along with some Moranth, but the Moranth, once they sense the tyrant's free, they of course flee back to the Cloud Mountains, Moranth land. We also see, Ambassador Aragan. He then sort of flees the city. All of his mages get killed by Teia, Vorkin's daughter, who Vorkin, of course, is a demon. She's one of the 12 servants of the demon of the tyrant, which of course she doesn't want to work for the tyrant, so she's chained herself up. But her daughter does want to work for the tyrant for whatever reason, just because she wants power. Who knows? She's evil. Teia is the one who killed Lasine in the Return of the Crimson Guard. Teia kills off all the remaining Malazan mages in the city, so Aragan has no way to contact anyone else on the continent. He's cut off, but they still have the Sceptre, the Imperial Sceptre that it's not Whiskey Jack, sorry, Dujek One Arm had in, I don't know, was it Memories of Ice? Anyways, so he brings that out and he's like, if anyone can hear this message, we're totally cut off. If the Empire has any interest in Genebacus at all, send whatever aid you can. Like, it just seems really cool. And who did they send but the Clawmaster himself, Topper. So Topper's back. Last we saw Topper, he was like kind of going crazy, existing as the creature Tatterdemalion in the Imperial War and killing everyone and anyone. At the end of Return of the Crimson Guard, he fought Cowl, the Crimson Guard assassin mage, master assassin mage, and ended up defeating him. Cowl got ensnared in the dead house. Anyways, so Topper takes his position back as head of the Claw. So it had been Lasine, Surly, and then it was Topper, and then was it Pearl for a time? Anyways, Topper's back in charge, so he's there. He doesn't actually assassinate anyone though. Anyways, so we have the orb, we have the scepter, the throne we'll get to. We also have Torvald Nom. You gotta love Torvald Nom. He, because Vorkan, who had been a counselor in place of House Nom for whatever reason, I can't remember. I think that was a Toll the Hounds thing. She's renounced her position because she's chained up in the basement. So Torvald Nom of House Nom is now a council member. And of course his wife Tessera's like, great, but you don't get paid, so what's the point? And he's all like, ooh, my wife. So he's a council member now, and of course they want to get rid of him, so they're like, go up to Pale, something's happening in Pale, go be an ambassador. So he's like, oh phew, I get to get out of the city. So he leaves the city, meets with Kaladin Brood, who's with this Rivi elder. So the Rivi want to, they had been, I don't know if they've been on the side of the Malazans, but anyways, they want to fight against the Malazans and kick them out of Genebacus once and for all. And Kaladin Brood's like, stop fighting, you idiots, but whatever, if you're going to do it, then do it. Anyways, Torvald Nom bumps into them on a ship, and they're like, you should go to the Moranth. He's like, man, I should totally go to the Moranth. He has with him stuff that the Blue Moranth gave him at some point. We don't really know how or why. I think it was Toll the Hounds. He just sort of showed up back in Darujhistan with this stuff. So at some point he bumped into some Blue Moranth and must have helped them out. So anyway, so he travels off to the Moranth. And they capture him and they're like, you're a spy. And he's like, no, I'm a council member. I'm an ambassador. Look at this stuff I have. They're like, you stole that. He's like, no, I didn't. Then they sort of check his story out and they take him and fly over an area where a very Thermopylae area. So we have the remaining Malazan troops on Genabacus from the north and south meet up along with Aragan and his few, and they're all fleeing the Rivi. But then the Rivi encounter the Seguleh, who have been sent to demand their subjugation. They're like, what? No. So the Seguleh just start slaughtering the Rivi. The Malazans use this opportunity to escape. They get to this narrow pass, the Hot Gates, and then the Seguleh are we've got the 10,000 Malazans against the 300 Seguleh. So it's sort of a reversal of roles. And the Malazans are about to be slaughtered, well, they're starting to be slaughtered, and then the Moranth show up on their quarrels, which are like dragonflies, and they just drop cussers down on the Seguleh and just utterly destroy them. And all sides see this, except for the Moranth, see this as just horrible. Like, it's sort of seeing modern warfare for the first time, where it's not two warriors, or two groups of people fighting against each other, or pitting their strength against strength. It's just, there's no way you can avoid this. It's just indiscriminate slaughter with no chance of escape. And so then the Moranth are like, okay, we're now going to go on to Darujhistan and nuke the whole place, basically, with their munitions. They're like, we've been waiting for this tyrant to come back. He's not going to live. But Aragan's like, wait, don't, please don't. No, that would be really bad. Everyone thinks that's bad. So with the Imperial Sceptre, he contacts the Emperor himself, Malik Rel, and manages to form a treaty or come to an agreement with the Moranth that he will send a strike force in first to try and take out the legate, and if that doesn't work, then you can wipe the city off the face of the earth. Because remember, Darujhistan is is lit by all these gas lights, so it's sat on this huge pocket of natural gas. That's why it sort of glows blue from all these lights. So you drop a few cussers on it, the whole city is going to just literally be nuked. So that's sort of one storyline, is Darujhistan. Inside Darujhistan, we have, of course, Krull's Bar and Temple, with the lovely Bridgeburners, the few remaining retirees. We've got Spindle, who's for some reason come back from the south, so he's come back from where he was in Tull the Hounds. But I believe in the Crippled God he's back south, so the timeline's kind of wonky. But Spindle's there, because it's Spindle. Also, Spindle is sort of the main character of The God Is Not Willing, which takes place after the Crippled God. And I find he's a much different character in that than he is in the rest of the novels. But that's a by the by. Maybe we'll do another The God Is Not Willing video, talk about that next time I reread it. But, so we've got Spindle, we've got Blend and Picker, Duiker, Imperial Historian Duiker, one of the sole survivors, not obviously not a soul, one of the survivors of the chain of dogs, and Fisher Telcath, or is it Fisher Keltath? Who knows? He's there too. Well, he's there. He's also with Envy. Envy's around, but they sort of have this weird breakup, and then Envy doesn't really do anything in this book. She's there, but if you remember at the end of Tull the Hounds, Kaladin Brood destroyed Dragnapur, releasing all of those slain and enslaved inside of it, including a certain Draconis, father of Envy. So Envy sort of sees her father. She does a casting, and one of them comes down, the King of High House Dark, her father Draconis. And she freaks out. Dad's back. And she sort of sees his shade and freaks out. And by the end of the book, she's like, you know what? I'm just going to go hang out in the Empire. At first I was like, wait, what Empire? But I guess that means the Malazan Empire. So maybe she'll be at court with Malik Rel in the next time we see her. I don't remember what happened to Spite. Spite's a character as well. I remember them fighting in Tull the Hounds, I believe, in the streets. Anyways, so yeah, so Fisher and her have some falling out, and Fisher goes and hangs out with the Bridgeburners. The sort of the demonic forces of the tyrant recognize the Bridgeburners as a threat, so they try to attack them with the Seguleh. However, if you remember, there are some Seguleh pickled in these barrels in the basement of Krull's, which promptly come to unlife and fight their living brethren, because it was all Krull's plan that if Darujhistan was ever reconquered by the tyrant, then of course it would be policed by the Seguleh, and who better to fight Seguleh than Seguleh? So that happens, and then they sort of back off, and then later one of the Aman, one of the other evil servants of the tyrant, one of the 12 demons, sends this automaton, this like great big massive stone automaton to fight them, and it breaks into Cruels, and we'll get to what happens to it later. So eventually Baruch manages to sort of tell Spindle, like, you got to deal with the stones. And Spindle's like, huh? And it takes him forever to realize, and some people have to come to his door and be like, the stones, my dude, deal with the stones. I think that was sent by Vorkan. Until Spindle's eventually like, oh, okay, Duiker, come on. We're going to Baruch's. He's got to have something there to deal with these stones. So they're rifling through the alchemist's shop, and they find this stuff that eventually does break down the stones, or like dissolves it and creates this poisonous vapor. So while the Moranth are doing their sort of infiltration, they're dropping cussers like mad on Darujhistan. Luckily, I forget who it was. Someone told the Greybeards. Greybeards? Is that Skyrim? The people who turn Grey Faces? People who turn the lamps on and off to like shut the gas off to the city tonight. Something's going down. So all the gas has been shut off, but they're dropping cussers left, right, and center. They're sort of hitting the barrier and just exploding and doing no damage. Meanwhile, Spindle's digging up the circle of stones, and he pours a whole bunch of the stuff on it, and it's starting to be destroyed, and then he finally has to awaken his warren to push through, which of course causes all the animals in the vicinity to just go crazy. But he doesn't quite manage to destroy the circle, and then Kaladin Brood shows up, and he's like, I told these guys, guess I gotta do it myself, and just walks over and like punches it, and because he's Kaladin Brood, it shatters. And Spindle's like, well, I weakened it, right? But it was kind of like that whole thing was pointless. Like, Spindle didn't have to do any of that, and all that, like Baruch giving him secret messages, and then Vorkan sending people to try and remind him, and then him figuring it out, and going to Baruch, like, all of that seemed kind of pointless when Kaladin Brood was just going to smash the circle anyways. So that was kind of weird. And then there's also this whole thing with... I don't understand this part. So Kruppe has been drugging up Darudan, right? But Darudan's also been preparing something. And it's like, oh, what's she preparing? Some like mysterious thing to help fight the Legate. And I mean, she does, which Kruppe then gets, but we never find out what that thing is. A bit later, Kruppe and Humble Measure, the blacksmith guy, get Barathal Makar, and they're like, we need you to craft something for us. And they're all secretive about it. And they're like, it's in this case, but you can't touch it with your skin. You have to use tongs and gloves and whatever. And it's like, oh, what's in the box? Like, what is it? We never find out. Cut to after they've forged whatever, Humble Measure and like takes all the tools and anvils and everything that they use to create this thing and like shoves it on a cart off the dock into the oceans. Like, that stuff's super cursed, man. Don't even touch it. And like Barathal goes back home and he's just like scrubbing himself clean. He's like, I'm not clean. I gotta get clean. I gotta get it off me. Like, what was it? Like, Otadrol? No, because they're not mages. They wouldn't care. Is it like some sort of weird radiation thing? Like, what? I don't understand what it was. But what they end up creating is these magical bolts, crossbow bolts. And it just so happens that Scorch and Lef, who at the start were Scholar Eben's bodyguard, and when Scholar Eben discovered the tyrant used him as a mouthpiece, and he was sort of semi-possessed by the tyrant. But whenever he saw Scorch and Lef, he was like, oh yeah, I hired those guys. They should stay with me. So Scorch and Lef, just comedic duo, Dumb and Dumber, get to hang out at the palace the whole time. And they just happen to, when everything's going down at the ultimate point in the novel, accidentally the crossbow goes off and shoots the Legate with these magical bolts that somehow got loaded into their crossbow. And oh look, they have a whole bag of them. So they're like, oh crap, we shot the Legate. Quick, keep shooting him. So they just keep shooting him because they're like, in for a penny, in for a pound. Like, we attacked him, we got to finish the job sort of thing, which makes sense. But why did the crossbow go off? I mean, I guess it's Kruppe. That's Kruppe. I do love Kruppe. Even written by Esslemont. That sounds even written by Esslemont. But what I mean to say is Esslemont writes Kruppe just as well. Maybe not just as well, but it's Kruppe. You love to see Kruppe. But yeah, so that sort of kills the tyrant. But then Kruppe sort of like has a weird dance with him where he's like, oh, you're dead. Oh, you've been shot. Like, I don't know what Kruppe does in the end. But then the mask is still there. But I think We see Barathol when everything's going down and munitions are exploding everywhere. He's like Scalara, so Scalara's there as well because he's living with Scalara and their baby Char, which that whole family dynamic I think is really well written. How she doesn't really care for the baby at all, and he's like, well, that's okay. Like, not everyone's born to be a mother. Anyways, he's like, Scalar, grab the baby. We're leaving town. And she's like, okay, well, let's get out of here. And the next thing we see is him going to the forge with Kruppe and Humble Measure again. And I assume they're melting the mask down to destroy the tyrant once and for all, but I'm not really sure. And then also at the very end, Kruppe gets Scorchin left to take one of the, like, take Amon, one of the demon servants, whatever, one of the bad ones, and inter him back underground. So I don't really know what happened to the actual tyrant itself. Like, it was shot with these magical crossbow bolts that I don't know what they were made of or what made them so magical and how they've managed to kill the tyrant other than it's just magic. And I don't know what exactly happened to the mask. I think it was melted down, but I'm not even sure. So while this is all happening, Rallicknom, remember good old Rallicknom, the assassin who was sort of laced with Otadril and had almost died, but spent some time in the dead house and was able to recover, which that dead house seems to be just like a not hospice or something, but you sort of drop someone off, they sleep it off for a few years, and then they come out totally healed. For whatever reason, he takes Scholar Eben, who I don't know if he's just suffering from PTSD from being partially traumatized or partially possessed by the tyrant, but for whatever reason, he takes Scholar Eben and brings him to the dead house and races there, and he's like, no, I don't want people here. I've already got a person, which is Char the Elder, the sort of simple-minded, shall we say, the man with the mind of a child who was looked after by Barathol, and during Tell the Hounds got poisoned somehow. I can't remember how, an assassination attempt or something, and so they dumped him. They dumped him in the dead house. So Rallick puts Scholar Eben in there to poor Raced, and takes Char back out and sends Char to Barathol, and Barathol's like, just like, Char, you're healed, you're back. And it's really cute. And then the guy who delivered Char is like, also, I'm supposed to take you to your villa. So Kruppe actually bought Barathol, or stole Barathol a villa. So Barathol, Char, Baby Char, and Scalara are all going to live happily ever in this villa, which is a nice ending. We also have the storyline of course, Decimultor, who, after killing Animander Rake, the Son of Darkness, Lord of Moonspawn, Mane of Chaos, Wielder of Dragnapur, Knight of High House Dark. What other titles can I give him? After he killed him, Decimultor was like grieving because he'd only done it because he wanted to sort of go against Hood because of the daughter thing. Anyways, he's living in this monastery, sort of way off in the mountains in Genebacus. And so these two Seguleh get sent after him, the 8th and the 8th son, because Animander Rake was ostensibly the 7th because of that wacky adventure when he bumped into the Seguleh hometown and was just killing them left and right. Like, why are these guys attacking me? And then left. So Animander was the 7th. And of course, Decim killing Animander becomes the 7th. So the 8th has gone to challenge him. When they finally get there, and there's a whole storyline of them picking up this girl, Yusek, as a guide to get there, and anyways, they get there, and Decim's like, no, I'm not going to challenge you, and then some words are said, and Decim's like, okay, fine, like, I don't want to be used, I don't want the Seguleh to be used anymore, but all we have are the choices we can make, so we're going back to Darujhistan, come on, guys. So they get back to Darujhistan just as everything's going down. They enter, and the Seguleh 3rd challenges the 2nd, but because the 2nd Jan, he's finally like, we're not going to fight anymore. Also, they've recovered this pristine mask of the 1st, the original mask of the 1st, which sort of glows. It's made of that same alabaster as the circle. So they're like, we can finally have a 1st. Jan, you must take it. And he's like, no, I won't. So then the 3rd challenges him, and anyways, there's a big duel. Jan makes it so that he ends up getting killed, and sort of does weird political I say political, but part of the Seguleh is when your swordsmanship is so on point, the only way to get better as a swordsman is to know what your opponents are going to do next. And so Jan displays that perfectly by everything he does in that duel, getting himself killed, which would cause trauma to the third, and so on and so forth, so that the only person who can accept the mask, or who will accept the mask, is of course Dasim Ultor himself. So Dasim accepts the mask and becomes first of the Seguleh, which is wild and really cool. Because he's like, I've always thought that he was the best swordsman. I know there's like, in the Malazan world, power levels are not a thing, but still, Dasim Ultor, come on. Even though I still think Animander was better than him, because I think Animander wanted to die in that fight, the way he twisted his sword so that he would be struck by his own sword. I think, and I mean, the sword, anyways, that's a whole other conversation. Dasim Ultor becomes first. But while Dasim Ultor is going in, one of the Moranth recognizes him, this old scarred veteran of the Moranth who's been there since the very initial signing of the treaty with Malaz. And he's like, I recognize that guy. That is Dasim Ultor, first sword of the Empire. And then all the Moranth are like, that's impossible. They're like, if he lives, he's a signature to the treaty we signed with Malaz. If he's still alive, that means the treaty's still on. It's like, because the Moranth and the Malazan Empire had an alliance, but for whatever reason, mysteriously, at some point that alliance sort of broke down. I think after Memories of Ice, suspiciously around when Whiskey Jack died. So maybe it was that the treaty would hold out as long as the signatures were alive. We were presumably Kellen Viddancer, Surly, Whiskey Jack, Dasim Ultor, maybe Taishren. Anyways, so that could have implications for the future if the Malazan Empire is continues to be allied with the Moranth. Although in the God is Not Willing, I can't remember exactly, but I believe they were either different types of munitions or Moranth munitions were no longer used. But anyways, that was really a cool moment. Just sort of hits home like, whoa, Dasim Ultor's still alive. I love that moment. It happens in Return of the Crimson Guard when he shows up on the battlefield in Quantali. And people are like, wait, what? He's alive? Love that. So yeah. So that's cool. And of course the Moranth decide they're not going to nuke the city because of all these events that occur. There's some other storylines though. Oh yeah, also that Talon Imas from Toll the Hounds, that one who had I can't remember, the special saber-toothed tiger bones, I can't remember the name of them, put in for his leg bones because he'd been thrown into this crevasse and broke his bones, and then the ritual of Talon happened soon after, so he was like stuck down there for eternity. I don't know why he didn't turn to dust. It was probably explained at one point. But anyways, the one that Harlow found and then saved. Also, in this book, Harlow and Stony are mentioned just as like, remember those guys? They still are here. I guess is neat just to see them. They don't even do anything. But anyways, that Talani Mas, who had been a slave to Raced and was like really good at like technical stuff and was like a bit of an inventor, I think. And Toll the Hounds, I believe he ended up getting interred in the grounds of the Dead House, which is like eternal imprisonment. Well, in this book, it seems like Raced dug him up from the front yard and brought him inside to play cards. So like Raced and his like former slave, this Talanamas and a Jagat, are just playing cards, like Deck of Dragon cards. But then at one point, the Talanamas, I can't remember his name, it's not said in this book, he's like, I smell ice or something. And Race is like, don't bother with the neighbors. So the Talanamas leaves the Dead House. Like, he's just allowed to leave it, I guess. Which, that goes against so many rules. And enters to sort of fight the Legate. Because he's anticipating the Legate being a Jaghut. Because I think the Legate / Tyrant was originally a Jaghut. But of course now he's just the soul in a mask. So the Amask goes up to the Tyrant and is like, oh, you're just human. And then leaves. He doesn't go back to the Dead House, I don't think. But yeah, he exists. So we also have this storyline of Antsy. So Antsy, he's not with Picker and Blend in Cruel's Temple and Bar. He has gone down south. So turns out Moonspawn, after the Bridgeburners had all been interred there and ascended there and blessed there and whatever, and it was sort of sent out to sea, it crashed in the sea, and it's been floating there, all these pieces of it. And so treasure hunters from all over have been just swarming this place to get at the treasures of the Andi in this place called the Spawns, the Fractured Moon Spawn. So Ansi goes down there because ostensibly to sort of get some treasure for a retirement fund, but of course he's going down there to make sure no one's tampering with the graves of the Bridgeburners. And it's a really cool storyline. Doesn't really connect with the rest of the plot, but who cares? So he teams up with Orchid, this girl who is described as Dalhanese, or not, she's not Dalhanese, but she has Dalhanese features. But it turns out later that she's part, it's sort of assumed that she's part Andi, but she doesn't realize it. She can speak Andi, she has powers of Elder Dark and Elder Magic. She has knowledge of so much Andi lore and culture. Turns out at one point she talks about how she had all these different teachers come to her, and she remembers they come to her young, and then when they leave her, they're old. So it's implied that she's lived on this island, in this temple of Elder Night, for a very, very long time. So she's very long lived. She's also part Elaint. So I don't know if that implies she's some relation to an Amander. Probably not, because I don't think... No, Amander is definitely Elaint as well, isn't he? Or it could be any another number of other Andi. There's no hints to her parentage. It's just that she's part Elaint and part Andi and part human, I guess. So she's kind of cool. Her name's Orchid, which is an Andi name. So with help of her and also this Corian Lim, who is a Darujhistani aristocrat, the three of them sort of dungeon crawl basically through the Moonspawn and through different layers and different areas, and they meet different peoples and just a plethora of mages and Malazans and marines and sappers, and Corporal Broach and Botclane are there with Reese. They're like just a fun cameo there. These super powerful mages are also there, and there's also this sort of creepy assassin-like guy who's there and helps them for a bit, but then sort of leaves them to their fate. And turns out he's there to try and one-up Apsalar, he says, but he means, of course, Apsalara, the Imas god of thieves, who attempted to steal from the Gardens of the Moon. And so that's what he's there. He's there for the Gardens of the Moon. And he actually gets to the Gardens of the Moon, but of course they're all dead, so there isn't this rose, this night rose or black rose that he's trying to steal. I thought that was a really, really neat little storyline. They also bump into Draconis, because Draconis, or at least a part or shade of Draconis, is there to sort of as a final farewell, because he's been in Dragnapur for who knows how long. So he gets out and he's just saying goodbye. And he hears Orchid speaking Andi, so he's like, who's this? And he helps them out. So they bump into other Malazans and Ansi's he's got a Bridgeburner tattoo. It's glowing when he's in there. It's a really cool storyline. So the whole place is sinking, and they eventually, Ansi thinks he's been knocked out or he's sleeping, but he sees this guy Ferret, one of the old Bridgeburners, and he has a chat with him, and it's like his ghost, and that's kind of like a cool little, wow, you get to talk with one of the dead Bridgeburners. And if that's not cool enough, later on he's about to die, or he thinks he's died or something, and then Mallet's there, and he actually speaks to Mallet, and Mallet's like, we don't want you dead, Ansi. Like, if you're dead, we're so sick of you. We want you alive. Well, we're dead. If you were dead, then we'd be stuck with you for eternity. You're gonna live. And then Ansi leaves, and then another character, a bearded character with a certain helm, marches in and talks with Mallet for a bit. Now, there's nothing to suggest anything other than the beard and the helmet, but I'm like, it's Whiskey Jack, and it's just Whiskey Jack. Yeah, so that was cool. So they fight their way through this moon spawn, and all of the people there are trying to find the Throne of Night, which is supposedly behind this door, and they try to get Ansi to use his cusser to blow open the door, and he's gonna do it, but then the thing tilts because it's floating, and the cusser falls and then blows this thing up, and it starts sinking, and the whole thing's about to collapse. But then because Orchid's Andi, she opens the door. They go into the Throne of Night, and she opens a pathway through it so that everyone's able to escape. So they escape to presumably Karkanis because a bunch of Andi priestesses show up and they're like, Orchid, you are part Elaint and Andi, come with us. She's like, whoa, cool, but you gotta help my friends out. So all those other people get sort of sent to Darujhistan at the end of this, including a group of Seguleh who had found that pure white mask. They had been sent out years before to find it. They found it, and that's how they deliver it to Jan II, and then, of course, to Desa Multor, the new first. It's not really explained why it was in Moonspawn. Like, it seemed to be gone for millennia. Like, I don't think Animander had stolen it while he was there and became 7th. Maybe he did, though. Anyway, so there's some Seguleh. There's these 3 brothers. One of them's name's Kulheel. The other 2 are also Heel. They're described as very tall, blonde. I picture them as like gripping Viking guys, gripping Scandinavian guys. And they know Fisher. They bump into Fisher in Darujhistan. They're like, Fisher, where have you been? And Fisher's like, what? You guys? What the heck are you doing here? So it's kind of hinted that, at least in my mind, because I have read the later books, even though I don't remember them, I think they're from a sale. So then Ansi, he's reunited with Spindle and the rest of the Bridgeburners, and it's nice. It's nice. So the final storyline, this is the storyline that's been sort of not hinted at, but it's been in the works for books. Like, the end of Return of the Crimson Guard, Taishran gets sucked into this world portal chaos thing. And Kiska's like, oh my no, what have they done to Taishran? I've got to find Taishran. So the whole time in Stormwielder, which has nothing to do with the rest of the Stormwielder plot, she and Leomin of the Flails, of all people, have been sent by Triss, the Queen of Dreams, the Enchantress, and with the aid of Shadow Throne and this weird sort of flying owl, tatterdemalion creature construct thing to hunt down Taishran. So they pass through the world. They meet with Tace Leo San. Anyways, in this book, they're at the shores of creation, the black sand shores with the Viter, where things are born, and like they bump into like dragons, and the Viter's weird. It's like acid. Anything that touches it gets melted, but also that's where life comes from or something. People emerge from it. I don't know. Anyways, so it turns out they do find Taishran, but he has no memories. He's been totally reborn. He is inured to the Viter, so he's the only thing that can go in it. And so he goes in it and is rescuing all these demons that are somehow falling into it. These are demons that have been summoned by mages, and then once they're done, they're cast into the Viter, I guess. So Taishran's like, he hates mages. He's been helping all these demons out. But he has no memories. So Kiska's like distraught. What are we gonna do? She finally is like, okay, I accept that, like, you're not the Taishran I know. Here, but this is one of his things. So she gives him the weird creature construct thing that had been leading them to Taishran, and of course that's when he gets all his memories back. It must have stored his memories somehow. The Enchantress must have done it, or Shadow Throne, or both of them. And so he gets all his memories back. But he's still not fully Taishran, because he's still the other person. He's been reborn. He looks different. He acts different, but he's back. So he's like, I'm sorry to those demon friends. He gives some of them the power to go out into the Viter and help other demons. But he's like, I've got stuff to do. So him and Kiska take off, and Leomin of the Flails is like, you know what? I'm gonna stay here. They're like, what? The shores of creation? There's nothing here. And he's like, nah, I'm good. So he stays there. It started out with Kiska and Leomin like hooking up, and they're like in a weird relationship now, and Leomin's always like, it's the mustache. I love my mustache. Ladies love it. Kiska's like, I hate that mustache so much, but I still sleep with him. Very, very tsundere. Very, I don't know. I felt weird about it. I didn't like their relationship. I still don't. So they go off, Kiska and Taishran. They go to Kartul, into the old Temple of Drek. And Taishran dives into a hole to like the bowels of the earth to commune directly with Drek, and also a sort of manifestation or avatar of Drek. This old woman chats with Kiska for a bit and lays some knowledge on her and says some important things or whatever. Taishran comes out. Him and Kiska then travel to Darujhistan. They end up in the basement of Krul's bar and temple, where the big automaton is about to kill the Bridgeburners, and of course Taishran, being the most powerful mage ever, unless you're asking Quickben, and destroys it. And then Tayshren's like, all right, I've got to do something. So he's in the basement of Krul's Barn Temple. Everyone else goes back up top side. They're all like, the Bridgeburners are like, who's this Claw? Kiska. She's a Claw. What's she doing here? Topper shows up and is like, come on, Kiska, we gotta go. And Kiska's like, okay, fine. So I guess Kiska's back with the Claw, but then we see her somehow she's back to the shores of creation. She's like, come on, Leo, man, I'll come to get you. I guess we're still a couple. And he's like, it's the mustache, gets him every time. Very Lando Calrissian. And goes off with Kiska. But we have, like, I mean, it's mentioned in this book a few times, like, Leomund of the Flails was a horrible mass murdering genocidal maniac in the Bone Hunters. Like, he burned Yigatan to the ground. Like, that was bad. Anyways, who knows where they'll turn up next. And the final thing we have is, and like I said, this is not explicitly stated. So, like, Tayshren's going down into the basement of Krul's bar to do something. He then later shows up in Kruppe's dream, much like Krul had in Tall the Hounds, I believe. He's like, you shouldn't call me Tayshren anymore. Call me Tren, like T''RENN, which is like a cool name, I guess. But I think it hints at basically what's happened is that Tayshren has become the new Krul. So Krul, master of the Warrens, creator of the Warrens, whose very arteries and veins are the Warrens themselves, and whose blood is like the blood of magic, has been poisoned by the crippled god. So the crippled god was an infection upon the world, and it poisoned magic, and that's why magic was sort of funky there at the end of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. We have Ikariam in the Dust of Dreams, or is it the crippled god, creating these new Warren systems, but we have now Tayshren sort of absorbing, merging with, taking on the aspect of the powers of Krul to become the new sort of god of the Warrens. And so he's sort of the new Krul, new god of magic. But of course the magic's, like I said, with Ikariam's new stuff, the magic in the world has had a huge change. So who knows what that's going to look like, unless you've read the book that comes after. Yeah, and like I said, that's not explicitly stated. You have to sort of read between the lines to figure out that, oh, that's what happened. Yeah, there's a few things in this ending that I was like, what? Like the stuff with Kruppe. Like, what was Kruppe up to the whole time? What were the bolts? What was Barathol helping Kruppe with? Anyways, so finally, I just want to say that this is very much feels like an end of a lifelong D&D game, or not D&D, but like D&D like game, right? Role-playing game. So we've got like all the original Empire founders. We've got Kelenvid, who became the god of Shadow and rules the Shadow Realm. Elder Shadow, Kurald Emberlin. We have Dancer, who became the god of Assassins. We've got Whiskey Jack and the Bridgeburners, who took the place of Hood and are now sort of death aspected. They're not ruling death, but they're like the gods of death. They're the new Hood, right? So they're ascended. We have Daesum Ultor, who has ascended to become the Decembre, the Lord of Tragedy, but also the first of the Seguleh, this sort of excellent swordsman warriors. So it's like all of their sort of player characters are, it's like end game. This is their end state. They can't go beyond that. And then finally in this book we have, we had Daesum as well, but we have Tayshren, of course, becoming, who was like, he had to have been a player character. I had to have been Esslemont's character, where he was like, I can see Erickson playing more of Quickben type of wizard, whereas Esslemont's just the straight Tayshren, who's just like a scholarly, super powerful, super innately able wizard, high mage. So Tayshren becoming the god of magic at this point, basically. So it's just, to me, that's the way I see it. It's all these player characters sort of reaching their end states as sort of gods, or sort of the peak of their individual their thing. Yeah, which I thought was neat. But like I said, this scratches your Malazan itch, which you should probably get that looked at if you have the Malazan itch. Uh, yeah, Orb Scepter Throne, really good. Just you want some Malazan, this is some Malazan. Yeah, and the kind of we just talked about the cover of the book as well. Like, I think this is one of the best Malazan covers of any book. We've got nondescript man with sword. It looks like a dueling rapier. I don't know, stand in for any Darujhistani characters, but the sort of the purple yellow contrast. So we're always seeing orange blue, but purple yellow. I mean purple yellow, but it's almost a purple gold, like a very dark gray purple gold. Looks fantastic. All these domes, sort of buildings of Darujhistan look fantastic in the background, and the cherry on top is the glow of blue around the city of Darujhistan, which just looks fantastic. I really like this cover. Probably the best one. Yeah, that was Orb Scepter Throne by Ian C. Esslemont. Good old Malazan.